Welcome to a Prevent Connect presentation, where we explore the prevention of violence against women. This is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. This presentation, Community Mobilization and Primary Prevention, is adapted from materials prepared for Prevent Connect by Lydia Guy Ortiz. Community mobilization is based on the simple premise that human beings are by nature social creatures whose behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs are profoundly affected by the norms of the communities in which they live. It is the process of engaging community members to change the norms within their own communities. By its very nature, it tends to be a primary level intervention. Its goal is to engage the community itself in activities that can prevent incidents of sexual and domestic violence. Keep in mind, its purpose is not to educate communities, although communities will learn throughout the process. Additionally, its purpose is not to provide services to communities, although communities may develop strategies that include providing support to survivors. The purpose of community mobilization is to empower communities to recognize and change the existing norms relating to sexual assault and domestic violence. Community mobilization is a systemic effort that engages a community to define the issue of sexual assault and/or domestic violence, to recruit stakeholders, champions, and leaders to initiate and/or sustain change efforts, to develop a plan to prevent the violence as it occurs specifically in their community, and to implement the plan. As professionals, our role is facilitating this process. For many people working in sexual and domestic violence programs, the most difficult task in incorporating community mobilization into prevention work is adopting the mentor and facilitator role. We have a tendency to do the work ourselves, rather than engage the community. Making the shift can be a challenge. A community mobilization strategy requires a significant investment in time and resources if you are to serve as an effective mentor and facilitator. It is most effective in communities that display a readiness to address the issues of sexual assault and domestic violence. Before engaging in an initiative, assess your resources and be aware of the possible benefits, challenges, and common mistakes. Also take stock of your own comfort level with the role of facilitator and mentor, and get training and mentoring if you feel it's needed. Benefits of community mobilization include: it naturally works toward primary prevention. It is by definition community-specific. It encourages community buy-in. And it is a facilitative process. All communities have both community and cultural norms. Culture is the way of life of a particular society or group of people, including patterns of thoughts, belief, behavior, customs, traditions, rituals, dress, and language, as well as art, music, and literature. Community mobilization encourages stakeholders to develop and implement strategies that reflect the culture of the given community. When this happens, community mobilization initiatives become powerful tools in developing strategies that are culturally competent, relevant, and compelling for historically marginalized communities. Many historically marginalized communities experience a sense of disconnection from mainstream institutions. There's been an expectation that universal strategies are enough, the one-size-fits-all concept. As a field, we have not invested enough resources in the development and implementation of strategies that address the reality of the intersection between oppression of all types and violence against women work. With community mobilization as a framework, communities can begin to understand oppression as part of the analysis of sexual and domestic violence, and from there develop strategies appropriate within a specific community. Community mobilization can also leverage the rich history of culturally specific strengths and assets. Community mobilization can be challenging because it requires significant initial investment of resources and relationship building. Because the strategy is process-oriented, it is difficult to implement effectively within highly prescriptive environments. Community mobilization is a mix of structure and the unknown, making it a challenge to manage. While the aim is a standardized process, by definition the outcomes, outputs, and activities will vary by community. And finally, it is a facilitative process and not a directive process. To get started with community mobilization, establish a relationship within a community. Then, identify and recruit stakeholders. Gather those stakeholders together into a mobilization team. engage your mobilization team in developing a plan, implement the plan, and then transfer the leadership to the mobilization team. Specifically, in developing a plan, you will create an asset mapping and/or community assessment process, develop an analysis of sexual and/or domestic violence, develop a community mobilization plan, and develop an evaluation plan. Engage your mobilization team in implementing the plan, as well as cultivating and maintaining assets. The team can help evaluate progress, can assume leadership roles in the mobilization process, and can assist with developing a sustainability plan. There are many specific community development frameworks that can be implemented. Adaptations of frameworks by the Asset-Based Community Development Institute and William Lofquist have been used in violence against women community mobilization work, and there are many more to choose from. Some frameworks lend themselves better to geographically based communities, while others work better in communities bound together by other shared traits. What is most important is that you choose a framework that resonates for you and that you are prepared to engage in authentic power sharing. Community mobilization is all about relationships. To provide an initiative with the best chance for success, you must have an existing positive relationship with a community that has a medium to high degree of readiness to address sexual and/or domestic violence happening in its midst. What are some common mistakes in community mobilization efforts? Most, if not all, community mobilization efforts will encounter prescribed structures that place limitations on some of the strategies that the group can realistically implement. Not understanding or acknowledging prescriptive parameters can be a costly mistake. Other mistakes include not trusting the wisdom of the group and/or not allowing them to self-correct, not identifying the correct stakeholders and/or being unwilling to add new stakeholders when they are identified, misjudging community readiness, not allowing enough time. Community mobilization is a time-intensive strategy, and not being committed to the entire process, in which the means are as important as the end. Community mobilization can be a wonderful strategy, provided you have a good knowledge of the dynamics of sexual and/or domestic violence, facilitation skills, understanding of community mobilization theory, and a true affinity for the communities you're attempting to mobilize. Those who promote positive change most effectively are not those who provide a new set of answers, but those who allow a new set of questions. Community mobilization has the potential to impact all levels of the social ecological model, even as the community level will be the designated or primary focus. As stakeholders engage in the mobilization efforts, the individual and relationship levels are impacted. Successful projects will change community norms regarding sexual assault and domestic violence. Community norms and societal norms regarding violence against women are deeply intertwined. As community norms shift, the larger societal norms will also shift. Let's look at examples of community mobilization initiatives on all levels of the social ecological model. First, Washington Middle School Prevention Project was a school-based initiative with a goal to create an urban middle school climate in which sexual harassment and sexual assault was unacceptable. The program was designed to change the community norms regarding sexual harassment. In this case, the community was the school. A group of stakeholders that included students, parents, administrators, school counselors, teachers, prevention project staff, and intervention staff from other social service agencies housed at the school developed and implemented the project plan. They created 3 strategies focused on each major constituency within the school: students, school personnel, and parents. Each strategy was comprised of several linked activities ranging from peer-based training to policy review. The individual level was not the designated focus. However, the group understood that individual stakeholders would increase their knowledge of sexual violence and also gain skills in the prevention of sexual violence through the implementation of the plan. Students learned to identify sexual harassment, to identify media influences, to challenge rigid gender expectations, as well as some techniques for bystander intervention. School personnel learned to identify sexual harassment, basic information about sexual assault and harassment, knowledge of their Title IX requirements, and to implement sexual harassment policies more equitably across programs. Parents learn skills in communicating with their children around healthy relationships, as well as basic information regarding sexual harassment and assault. Continuing with the example of the Washington Middle School Prevention Project, the majority of the resources were focused on students. 6th grade students participated in a life skills class. 7th grade students started a Students Against Violence Everywhere chapter with a focus on interpersonal violence, and 8th grade students created a video project and classroom presentation on sexual harassment. A girls' empowerment group and a boys' responsibility group were also created. These activities were designed to address multiple groups in many settings so that over the course of 3 years, students received the information many times in different formats. Again, the focus was changing the overall school climate. Changing the norms within the various student communities was the goal of the strategy. The secondary benefit was that students' beliefs, expectations, and behaviors regarding healthy relationships changed. Evaluators measured change through behavioral surveys, school disciplinary reports, and hallway observations. By the end of the project, there were less incidences of harassment observed in the hallway, as well as more incidences of bystander intervention. Now let's focus on a community-level example. Partners in Prevention Education began as the Homeless Youth Project to mobilize homeless youth and the professionals working with them to prevent sexual violence in their community in Olympia, Washington. The initial stakeholders in the project included project staff, homeless youth service providers, domestic violence agency staff, and juvenile justice professionals. As the project developed, business owners became important stakeholders. The project ran for 3 years before successfully becoming a 501c3 in 2007, with the mission to engage homeless and at-risk youth and adult allies in the elimination of sexual violence, bias, and hate crimes as they contribute to homelessness and as it exists in street culture. We achieve this through social change work, violence prevention education, and survivor support services including advocacy, therapy, and support groups. The project identified sustenance sex, the trade of sex to meet basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter, and the societal attitudes regarding homelessness as risk factors that contributed to the sexual violence present in the homeless youth community. To prevent sexual violence, stakeholders identified the need to develop non-traditional partnerships, including business owners, to increase youth's access to basic needs. Business owners were vocal in condemning the youth and helping to perpetuate oppressive behavior within the wider community of Olympia, so bringing them to the project was critical. This initiative is a classic community mobilization initiative designed as a community-level intervention. It capitalized on the assets of the community to create an entity whose sole focus is the elimination of sexual violence, bias, and hate crimes as they contribute to homelessness and as it exists in street culture. The creation and sustenance of this nonprofit is a change in the community norms within Olympia. Using the same example of Partners in Prevention Education, the Olympia project was designed to influence community norms regarding homelessness and sexual violence. The link between homelessness and sexual assault has clearly been documented as a larger societal issue. The mission of this project is not to provide services to homeless teens, but rather to change street culture itself. This is a clear example of societal-level intervention. Community mobilization is resource-intensive. It is a process that requires organizations to engage in authentic power sharing. It requires mastery of several skill sets and demands intensive saturation. It will take time to see evidence of success. All of these factors make community mobilization a strategy that can only be effectively implemented in an organization that supports this work. Prevention educators cannot sustain this work alone and in isolation. So agencies must value the development of community-specific interventions, as well as a paradigm shift from social service to social change. A successful community mobilization project requires demonstration of readiness by the educator, agency, and the community. This presentation was informed by the following sources. Thank you for joining this Prevent Connect presentation. For more information on this topic and for other e-learning units, visit learn.preventconnect.org. Prevent Connect is a national project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault and is sponsored by the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control at the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views and information provided here do not necessarily represent the official views of the United States government, the CDC, or CalCASA. For more information and resources about the prevention of sexual and domestic violence, visit preventconnect.org.